All right, welcome to another episode of Daytrypp'n with Rudy Montijo. I'm your host. I'm Rudy Montijo, coming to you from the Merc Bar in Phoenix, Arizona. Ever in town, want to grab a cocktail, take a date out? Great place to come and hang out. Merc Bar, Phoenix, Arizona, and thank you, Rick Phillips, owner of the Merc Bar, for letting us record here. And today I have a friend and a very special guest that I think you're all going to really get a lot out of his story. Dave Romanelli. Dave, you want to say hi?
Good to be with you, Rudy.
Thanks, man. Thanks for making the time. I know you're busy. We both have kids and all that. Why don't you tell people a little bit about your background? I know you one of the founders of At One Yoga here in Scottsdale.
Yeah, we opened about it was 1998. It was when yoga was just becoming a thing. And we opened a community of yoga studios here in Phoenix. It was about getting rid of the rules and the traditions and making yoga fun and relatable for the mainstream. And we sold the business in 2010 to Lifetime Fitness. And I took kind of a hard pivot with everything I was doing because I visited my last surviving grandparent who was in an old age home. And I realized, that's a lonely life and we don't treat old people well in our culture. And here I was in the yoga world where like the 32-year-old with the big Instagram following was the source of wisdom. And the World War II survivor, the 88-year-old World War II survivor is dying a lonely death in the old age home. So I kind of shifted my life path and started interviewing older people and wrote a couple books about it and really did a deep dive into that. And that was sort of my background. I'm sure we'll get into what's happened more recently.
Yeah, we'll get into the books for sure. Did you start At One by yourself or?
No. We had it was 3 friends from college. I was my friend Ian Lowe-Payton's was the vision he had, and we had a couple buddies from college.
Ian started Spiritual Gangster, right?
Yeah.
So Spiritual Gangster is a really big, very cool clothing brand. Big fan of their.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you part of Spiritual Gangster at all too?
I'm an investor.
You're an investor. Great. So you and I met almost a year ago now, and we had an event at your house that was part of Make-A-Wish Foundation.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got involved with Make-A-Wish as a grantor and a grantee? And
yes, my daughter had leukemia when she was 3 years old.
Cooper,
my daughter Cooper.
And then you have a son too.
Son Remo is 8 now. Cooper's 6. My wife McKenna. And when kids have a life-threatening illness, they are, if you reach out to Make-A-Wish, they grant all children with life-threatening illnesses a wish, because at first when I heard about that, I thought it was for terminally ill children, and I wanted nothing to do with it because, it wasn't a terminal thing. And we learned that the science shows that when the kid is granted a wish, there's all this scientific research that shows they have less hospital visits, they get better faster. And more than anything, it changed the conversation in our home from like doctor's appointments and all the stuff you're dealing with when you're going through cancer treatment. And instead, like, we were excited about this wish. So she got a pink playhouse in the backyard.
So that's really interesting. I wasn't aware of that. Basically changing your focus from the sickness to what you're looking forward to has a whole different effect on the outcome of one's health, whether it's mental or physical.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially with kids. Kids don't want to talk about doctor's visits and all that. They want to talk about the things they're excited about.
Okay, and so you ended up getting...
So I got involved. They invited me to join the board. And I'm involved in the organization now, and the local Arizona chapter granted 460 wishes this year. So it's a pretty powerful thing that they do in our community.
And Cooper
she got a pink playhouse.
Yeah. And I was in that playhouse. We had an event at your house. That was a Make-A-Wish fundraiser. I actually bought a piece of Cooper's art, which is right here.
Beautiful.
So try to do my contribution. You're welcome. It hangs up in my house.
Love it.
And it has a story behind it.
Yeah.
So Cooper got a pink house. How did that change her whole affect and her outlook on things? How did it shift her focus from treatments and being sick to now I have this playhouse?
Well, she's very sensitive, and I'm a spiritual person, and I think that part of what happened with her having leukemia was we weren't rooted at that time in her life. We had moved several times, and I think she takes that on, you know, a really sensitive child, and I think it affected her well-being. She, you know, even if we take a trip, Cooper's very sensitive. So now we moved into this new home, and she had her playhouse in the backyard, and I think the symbolism is this is home, not just for the family, but this was her home. And I think she needed that kind of sense of being rooted, but she didn't have that for a couple of years. And so who knows? I mean, you know, some kids are very sensitive.
Well, you mentioned something that kids take on what's going on with their parents' life. And so I think it's very important as an adult and as a parent myself that I do what I have to do to take care of myself so I don't pass that on to my kids.
Yeah.
And I say that with a grain of salt because every parent does the best that they can. So I don't want to put any added pressure on parents. But at the same time, we are the adults. You know, like I can choose to go see a therapist. I can choose to go to AA. I can choose to stay sober so I can be a better and more present father to my kids. You're going through this traumatic experience. You know, you and your wife, you weren't alone in this. But I could imagine that the fear of Cooper getting sick again can really rustle up some anxiety. How did that situation affect you from a traumatic standpoint and how you felt like with anxiety and fears, you know, going forward?
I mean, having a kid go through something like this, I mean, my wife and I have learned to be honest about it, and we've kind of looked into it. It's severe PTSD. You know, it's, I mean, we don't want to pussyfoot around it. It's severe PTSD, and it gets she's a year past treatment now, so she only has to go to get a checkup once every other month, which is a big step because, you know, we always had to go every month and get the blood test, and it was always a little nerve-wracking. Now it's every other month, and it gets a little easier as we get farther from it. But every time she gets a cold or any little thing, you worry a little differently as a parent, and you have to navigate your mind, and you don't want to trigger each other. So it is one of the hardest things in my life, and I'm certainly in my wife's life as well, and we're learning, and it gets a little easier every day.
You know, I can't imagine going through that, and whenever your child sneezes or gets sick, automatically your mind probably goes to the worst. And that fear, you know, I'm a therapist as well, and Gabor Mate talks about this, about the parts of trauma.
Yeah.
And so you have the event, which is Cooper getting sick for real.
Yeah.
And then you have the trauma, which is what you and your wife experience, and her, but the anxiety and the fear and the worry.
Yeah.
Now there's a third part of that, which is the collateral aspect. And what I mean by that is when you're scared, a lot of other things are externalized, especially when you're in a close relationship. I don't want to get too personal as far as you and your wife's relationship, but I could imagine this anxiety and fear, sometimes it comes out as irritability or lack of patience and can bring tension to a relationship.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was somebody told me on day one, another dad who had been through this, on day one, he said, watch out for your marriage because it is very taxing on a marriage to go through this level of pressure. But I'm proud of my wife and I because we've worked through some stuff, and I think we're closer now than we ever were before. And, you know, the benefit of going through something like this is that even though your fear is much more intense, your level of gratitude is also significantly greater, and the quality and purity of your joy for just a normal, healthy day is so profound, you know? So there's a lot of blessings from it.
It sounds like you've taken extreme adversity and turned it into an opportunity to be grateful and really shift your perspective a lot.
Yeah, and it's a story, you know? I mean, it's a story that we tell and we share, and the part of the healing process is telling the story and helping other people realize that sometimes the problems that we all deal with every day aren't that significant. I mean, health is so precious, especially in your children. And so, you want to celebrate that every day.
Well said. Well said. So tying this back into Daytryp, I know, and you've said I could mention this, so I'm not breaking HIPAA, but you've got ketamine treatments at Daytryp Health and Wellness.
Yeah.
And I know we've had conversations before where you were struggling with something and you called me and we talked through it. And one of the things I want to explain to the viewers is when you have a traumatic event, you have the event, then you have the trauma, and you have a cord that attaches those. So you have an attachment. And when something in the present triggers that event, you have these fears and everything else that comes out of it. So one of the things that I talked to you about was separating emotion from reality. So your feelings aren't facts. That's a saying out there. And so just because I'm feeling something doesn't make it true.
Yeah.
And so just because somebody or Cooper sneezed doesn't mean she's sick.
Yeah.
So how has ketamine helped you dissolve that attachment or helped you with your anxiety and your levels of fear?
I mean, it totally takes that part of your brain, the default mode network that just is turned on and overactive with worry and anxiety, and it feels like it completely unplugs it. And so when I emerge from the end of a ketamine treatment, I'm completely relaxed. And that more than anything for me is like I couldn't get that from like a Hawaiian vacation,
right,
or some exotic trip somewhere. I mean, it's like the most profound sense of like, okay, I don't have, that worried part of my mind that's just fried goes offline, and I have a chance to come to life and remember what it's like to not worry, and I can work with that. And that's really what I need to heal and to be frankly, to be a better father and a better husband, because your family doesn't want you to worry. It's annoying. Like my parents worry about me. I just find it very annoying.
Yeah, if I don't answer a text or a call, I drank for many years, and so if I didn't answer a call from my mom or my dad, automatically, my mom especially goes into fear mode.
Yeah.
Is he lying in a ditch somewhere? Did he start drinking? All these things happen. And so annoyed, I get annoyed, I get frustrated, but I got to turn it back to myself. And this is kind of the self-awareness aspect of it that ketamine therapy has helped me too, is look, she's acting that way because of what I put her through. So some accountability has to be had on my part. Like if I didn't do that throughout my years, she wouldn't be acting this way. So have a little compassion for your mom, have a little patience for your mom. And it's really helped me be more present with my kids as well.
Yeah.
You got some books here on the table.
Yes.
You mentioned old people.
Yes. I've written a couple books about the wisdom and the messages I learned from the oldest among us. This book, Happy is the New Healthy, was inspired by a lady I got to know when I lived in New York City who was 111.
111?
Yeah, and her 3 tips to health and longevity were sex, vodka, and spicy food. And so the book's all about joie de vivre, remembering to enjoy life.
What if you eliminate the vodka? Will I still live a long time?
Yes, I know. It's always, the whole point is, what do you have to do to loosen your grip and when you go to bed and put your head on the pillow at night, like what did you do that day that you remembered that gave you joy?
Okay.
And then the other book about the elders was called Life Lessons from the Oldest and Wisest, and it's a lot of interviewing people in their 80s, 90s, and 100s, several Holocaust survivors, some World War II veterans, some single moms who lost husbands in the war and raised 5 kids alone, and just great wisdom from people who have been through the greatest generation, who went through some really hard times in history and emerged to live beautiful lives, and I think you can learn a lot from them.
Okay. What's the other book?
And the other book was kind of an R-rated. My first book was stories from what goes on behind the scenes in the life of a yoga teacher.
So yeah, the yoga community is interesting. I mean, we won't get into it. But
This was a different kind of book. Very irreverent, a lot of fun, slightly offensive. Kids won't be allowed to read that for many years.
Good. Are these available on Amazon? Where
Yeah,
can
they're
somebody
all
buy
on. You
these?
can all get them on Amazon.
So I'll just tell you the
Yeah,
first
Dave's
book,
guide. Dave's guide to live in the moment.
the dirty yoga book that Dave wrote is called "Living in the Moment: Getting to Ecstasy Through Wine, Chocolate, and iPod Playlist."
iPod playlist. Yeah.
Yeah, if any of you guys know about yoga communities, that's going to strike a nerve. So these are the two ones that I want to focus on: life lessons
From the oldest and wisest.
from the oldest and wisest, written by Dave Romanelli, available on Amazon, as well as Happy is the New Healthy. As far as these two books right here, what's a common denominator? What's a common theme that these people have found that help them live a long and a healthy, happy life?
I mean, there's a few things. Resilience is huge. Like everybody gets knocked down, and the older you get, it feels like the more it happens, and we have to bounce back. You have to be willing to get up, brush yourself off, and keep getting after it. And a lot of times we get defined by what goes wrong in life, and that becomes our story. And I've also interviewed a lot of elders who didn't have a happy joie de vivre, filled story. It was defined by failures and frustrations and divorces and whatnot, and we all can get stuck in those ditches sometimes. So we have to be resilient. We have to get back and keep going. That was one thing that I learned. Another thing was you have to have a sense of humor. I mean, there's so much that's happening to us all the time, and if we squeeze too tight and we don't manage to get perspective, which ketamine is so great for,
Right.
you have to have a sense of humor. You have to be able to laugh at yourself, with yourself. If you take it too seriously, you're in trouble. And as I mentioned, the joie de vivre, like when you got to have something, I call it a beautiful, funny, and delicious moment each day, keeps the stress away.
A beautiful, funny, and
BFD.
delicious moment each day.
BFD. Beautiful. Like one of the things I talk about is the Joshua Bell experiment. The Washington Post did a very famous social experiment where they put the greatest American violinist named Joshua Bell in a DC subway stop during rush hour, and they surrounded him with hidden cameras, and they wanted to see if people would stop and listen on the way to catch a subway, and over 1,000 people raced by and only one person stopped. So it's like, if we don't have time for the greatest American violinist, what else in life are we missing because we're just going too fast?
Wow.
So how do you have a beautiful moment where you stop and enjoy the sunset, the full moon, the street musician? You got to make time for it. And funny is just, make sure you have a moment in your day where you loosen your grip and laugh. And delicious is, we kind of scarf down our food.
Yes.
And how do you actually, if you could really savor a moment when you're eating and enjoy it, just BFD, if you could have that mental checklist.
Enjoying the simple things and taking time to be present with them.
I mean, it's so cliche, but you got to have that mental checklist. So.
Agreed. Very cool. I didn't know a lot of this about you, so I'm glad we were able to do this because I'm learning a ton more.
Yeah.
Dave is also our Chief Vibe Officer at Daytryp Health and Wellness, which is a cool name. It's very fitting. And you lead our retreat division.
Yes.
You lead Daytryp retreats.
Yes.
And you've just acquired a property, Birdsong 38. Tell us about Daytryp retreats. Tell us about Birdsong.
Well, for many years, I had led yoga and meditation retreats. For 20 years, I've been doing that all over the world. And I had a few very profound psychedelic experiences, even before Daytryp, psychedelic therapeutic experiences. And I thought to myself, it would be really cool to lead psychedelic retreats. Mm-hmm. And saw before Daytryp opened, Chris had posted on Facebook this new psychedelic center. I reached out to him and we got to talking. Let me bring people in from all over the country. And
Chris, you're talking about Chris Cohn,
yeah.
one of the founders of Daytryp. Yeah.
And I said, let me bring people in. There's a great interest in this, and let's do a retreat. So we brought people in from all over the country. Actually, a lot of them were even older than me, 60s, and some in their 70s, who were looking like, what's next in life? How do I heal this trauma? And they came in, they stayed at a hotel. We did ketamine sessions at Daytryp. We took them to the cold plunge, went Arizona hiking, had great meals at night, and it was so great that we decided to open a retreat center here in Arizona called Birdsong. So people will come in, it'll all take place in one spot, and it's kind of the first of its kind in this country because it's legal and it's upscale, and you come in and you check in on a Thursday, and we take care of everything all weekend. So you really get to go deep within yourself. You don't have to worry about the day-to-day routines and emails and responsibilities.
You've got food, chefs,
private chef. You get your we have deep tissue massages. There's the hot tub, cold plunge, sauna. So it's like the hot cold therapy to get you really into your body before you go deep in the psychedelic journey, and then you come out of that and you get a deep tissue massage and just completely melt. And it's very indulgent, relaxing, therapeutic, all of it, and it's all taking place under one roof, and it's called Birdsong.
And then are you going to incorporate, the big thing with ketamine is like post-integration, so any kind of modalities to help people sustain what they've learned, like breath work, meditations?
Yeah, so, and we're going to do integration ceremonies after each psychedelic session at Birdsong. But something that I do that's I've been doing for many years is I have these daily meditations, and we started something that I still offer to people called Daytrypp'n, which stands for Totally Relatable Integration for Psychedelic Therapy. So everyone that comes to Birdsong will get this 7-day meditation series. Wow. And then if they choose and enjoy it and want to keep going, I send it to them literally every day.
Okay.
And it's a way to set aside 18 minutes of your day with your cup of coffee or on your walk, and I tell you stories, it's like a podcast that segues into relaxation meditation, and it's a way to stay connected with what you experience at Birdsong. But you have to do that work and make that commitment, and you have to set aside those 18 minutes.
I think that's the important part about a lot of this is people think that whatever it is, if somebody does a psilocybin journey or ayahuasca, we use ketamine, which is 100% legal. It's not a cure-all. There's work to be done before and after. So anybody that comes to a session, whether it's at Daytryp or to one of your amazing retreats, there's work to be done if you want to have sustainable change.
Yeah, I mean, I've had, to be honest with you, it's like, I'd say we had 17 people that came on our first round of retreats, and I'd say like 15 of the 17 got so much out of it. A couple people were disappointed because they were expecting a miracle, and it's not a miracle, but it can set you up for a miracle because it shows you what's possible if you do the work.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that, because I don't want people to think that this is a snake oil or it's going to be effective for everything. You got to be able to one, have the self-awareness and accountability, and then be willing to put forth that effort like anything else and be resilient to whatever adversity you're facing.
Yeah.
And to everybody listening, like, even if you don't think you need something like ketamine therapy or a retreat like this, with this type of therapy, there's something called unexpected outcomes. So people come in even with a certain intention of what they want to get out of it, and after their experience, they realize they got something totally different out of it, which is very profound because it teaches you to, one, release some control to your expectations and be open to the possibilities of what else is out there.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. There'll be links to the Daytryp app, your meditation app, to Birdsong to find out more about the retreats, in all forms on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Music. Anything else you want to say to everybody?
Yeah, it was just one more thing. I mean, I think, since I've gotten into psychedelic therapy, you get some backlash from people who have stories where something went awry and someone they know that did it and had a bad experience. And, life throws curveballs at you sometimes. I never expected my 3-year-old to get cancer. It's not something you expect. And, I said at that point, like, I need to come to life differently and do something that's not, down the beaten path, because this was really hard, and really hard things happen in life, and sometimes you need to come to things differently. And so for anyone who's, resistant to this, if life is really hard for you and the ways that you're going about things are not working for you, this is something to consider because it has such a profound effect. So
Very well said.
That's what I wanted to share.
Well, thank you very much. And that's part of what this podcast is all about, is really educate people on how psychedelic therapy, ketamine therapy could really help change your life in a positive way. When things aren't really working, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again. This is one way that you can really, and it's scientifically proven. There's data that supports this, but it helps build neuroplasticity and really changes the way you think. And so if you're struggling out there, get in contact with us. You can email me, rudy@daytryp.com. Go to the website, daytryp.com. If you want to hear about the retreats, you can email dave@daytryp.com or go to birdsong38.com. So there's all sorts of resources out there, but you got to do the work. You got to take that first step, and I guarantee you, if you're willing to take that first step and put your hand out, someone will grab your hand and help pull you through whatever you're going through.
Love it. Amen.
Amen. All right. Well, thank you all very much. Thanks again to Rick Phillips. Thanks to all the listeners out there. And thanks to the Merc Bar for allowing us to record here. We'll see you next week on the Daytrypp'n podcast with your host, Rudy Montijo. Say goodbye to Dave Romanelli.
Peace.